Hi everyone, it's Laura here for Impronte d'autore, and in today's video I'm going to share with you 3 different wedding cards that I created with the Love is Love and Love in Color stamp sets. Before starting with the tutorial, I wanted to show you the sets that I'll be using today. These ones are new in the Impronte d'autore range, and the first one is called Love is Love. And the second one that I'll be showing to you in a moment is called Love in Color. The sets can be used by themselves to create wedding cards or wedding invitations for same-sex couples, or can be combined together to create the same projects for opposite-sex couples. In today's video, I will be sharing 3 different cards, 2 of which use the stamp sets by themselves, and the third one combines the two. And here you can see that each of the set comes with matching dies that will die cut out your images. Coming to the tutorial, I started by die cutting some smooth white cardstock using the Fawn large stitched rectangle Stackables dies. This is the largest die in the set. And then I ran the panel through my die cutting machine once again using this cloudy backdrop die, also by Fawn. Next, I created a flag banner using the flags dies by Impronte d'autore. I used the largest die in the set to cut some smooth white cardstock, and then I ran my banner through my die cutting machine to create a stitched detail on the left side of the banner, or on the top, depending on how you'll be gluing it on your card. As you can see, once I line it up with my background, I have a continuous stitched border, and this is why I always like to take this extra step whenever I worked with stitched dies for my card bases. I decided to add a little bit of color using my Distress Ink Inworn lipstick, and I'm blending it with my blending foams from the outside edges of the paper towards the inside using a very light hand because I don't want to cover the entire panel, but I just want to have a very soft shading on the edges, and I'm going to do the same for my card base. At this point I could move on and started working on my images. For this card, I'll be using the Love in Color stamp set by Impronte d'autore, and I'm doing my stamping using the Stella stamping platform, also by Impronte d'autore. The ink that I'm using is VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I'm going to be able to stamp the images a couple of times until I get a nice impression. My ink pad is a little bit dry, and this is why I needed to stamp my images twice. And then after that step is done, I can coat the images with embossing powder. This is clear embossing powder, and use my Impronte d'autore heat gun to melt the powder. For my coloring today, I'll be using Zicklin Color Rio brush markers and this blender here, which is also by Zig, but it's from the Art and Graphic Twin series. Both the Zicklin Color Rio brush markers and the Art and Graphic Twin markers are water-based markers, and so the blender for one will work for the other two, and this is why I'm able to mix them up today. But if you didn't have the blender, you can either just blend your markers with each other or use a paintbrush wet with some water to obtain the same result, basically, that I'm obtaining with the blender. Whether you use a paintbrush or a blender, it's always important to make sure that they are nice and clean when you switch from one color to the next, otherwise you'll end up contaminating your area. You can do that on a scrap piece of paper or, like I'm doing here, on the corners of your cardstock. I started by coloring one of these 2 lovely girls, and for her face I used some skin tones. As you can see, I have the marker numbers on screen so you can follow along if you like. I wanted the dress to be mainly white, just with a couple of pink accents that would tie my image back with my ink blended background. And to shade the white areas, I used a light blue marker that I added in the shadow areas and then blended out towards the highlight. I'm using some browns for the hair, and I am then going to move on and color the other image using pretty much the same color palette. The only difference will be the hair that I colored with a different color combination to create a little bit of variation. I started with this quite light and bright yellow, and I'm adding it to the entire area using some flicking motions with my wrist to create some texture in the hair of this lovely girl. This first layer is quite bright and a little bit too cartoonish, so I decided to tone it down with a skin tone marker actually, that I'm using to basically go over the same areas that I covered with my light yellow marker. And then as a last step, I'm coming in with a light warm brown marker to add some shading to the hair and create dimension. I will not be sharing the coloring for the rest of the images that I used on my other cards today, and I will skim through the card making process for those cards relatively quickly. As I said, the design is the same, the difference is basically just in the color palette that I used and the characters that I have on my cards. So basically, once you see me make one of the cards, you'll be able to make all three of them by just changing a few little details. The Loving Color stamp set comes with this fun image of this Volkswagen's van, and I decided to use some pinks to color most of the area of the van itself. I used a pink marker that would match as closely as possible the background that I have on my card, and it's always helpful to have a swatch where you can see what your markers look like on paper. Again, I'm using my blender to blend out my marker and I'm cleaning it in between applications, and for the rest of the van I'm using this light blue marker, which is the same that I used on the dresses of the brides. I'm adding the marker to the shadow areas, which I am focusing on the left part of my image, like I did for the rest of the images on my card, and then I'm using my blender to blend everything out towards the right portion of the image where I have my highlights. I used some yellows to color the lights of my van, a cool gray marker for the windshields, and a darker gray marker for the tires. And then once everything was colored in, I went ahead and die cut the images with the Loving Color coordinating die set. I also used a sentiment from the Fawn Bicycle Built for You stamp set, also available on the Impronte d'Autore website, and I stamped the greeting "Enjoy the ride." I used Versamark Onyx Black ink, and again I did some heat embossing with clear embossing powder, and then I moved on and started assembling my card. I glued the banner to my background, aligning the left edges so that the stitched border is continuous on my card base, and I also left a little bit of space between the lower edge of the banner and the bottom portion of my card front. I'm adhering everything to a top folding A2 card base, again using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, and then I can go ahead and glue down the images. I'm gluing the van flat on my card, and for my girls I'm using some foam squares so that I create a little bit of interest on this otherwise quite clean design. As a last step, I could not resist and I had to add some glitter to this card. For that I'm using my Nuvo drops in the color Snow Blizzard. These will dry clear and have some glitter in them, so we have a little bit of sparkle on this cute wedding card. I left my Nuvo drops aside to dry, and then I moved on and started creating my second card for today. For this one, as I said, the design is the same, the only difference is the color palette and the stamp set that I used. As you can see, I have the same background and the same banner die, but I'm using shaded lilac distress ink instead of worn lipstick to add a touch of color to my die cut elements. The images I used are part of the Love is Love stamp set, and I colored them with Zicklin Color real brush markers after having stamped them with VersaFine Onyx Black ink and heat embossed them with clear embossing powder. The sentiment is the same one that I used on my card from before, from the Bicycle Built For You stamp set, and also in this case I'm popping up my characters on some foam squares and gluing the bicycle flat on my background. Another touch of glitter with my Nuvo drops in the color Snow Blizzard, and then I can move on and create my third card that I created off camera. In this case, I mixed the two stamp sets, and for a touch of color I used my Distress ink in Cracked Pistachio, and again kept to the same design and same supplies pretty much. And that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I inspired you to create with the Love is Love and Love in Color stamp sets by Impronte d'Autore. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more card making and paper crafting inspiration. Thank you all so much for stopping by, and have a great day.